This conference will now be
Welcome to the
recorded.
first episode of After the Refresher Class. I will be your host, Angelo Garcia III, Chief Cook and Bottle Washer for Future Environment Designs. Future Environment Designs is a 37-year-old company that has been performing asbestos, mold, and OSHA compliance training. After the Refresher course is a podcast uh, regarding the discussions we've had in the asbestos, mold, and OSHA compliance refresher classes. We hope future episodes will include individuals who attended the classes and continued discussions we had in the classes. This episode, we will go over some of the discussion points we've been having in our asbestos refresher class. So in New York State, an asbestos project consists of all of this that you see here. It's phase one, where phase 1A, where we basically do the survey. The survey is what decides whether an asbestos project, whether the project is an asbestos project or not. So once the survey is determines that the uh, work area or the area that's going to be renovated, remodeled, demolished, or repaired, once that area is determined to have asbestos, then basically that project is considered an asbestos project. Obviously, if there's no asbestos involved in that project, then that would be not an asbestos project, and we wouldn't have to go through this process. So once the survey determines that an asbestos project, what an asbestos project is, the next thing is deciding what to do with that asbestos, and that's the planning part. So that is done by a management planner. The next part is designing the work practices and the work procedures for how the work is going to be handled, how the asbestos is going to be handled. And the person who does that is considered the project designer. We then basically are going to have background air sampling that has to be done before the project starts and before the contractor arrives. That's going to be done by the project air sampling technician or the project monitor. Then we actually have the actual abatement work, right? Phase 2A is your prep, right? Everything you have to do to prepare to handle asbestos. Phase 2B is the actual handling asbestos. Phase 2 is your cleanup and clearance. And phase 2D is the removal of the dumpster from the site. So this is what we consider an asbestos project. And so in our classes, we've asked the students that how many asbestos projects have you done in the last year to give us an idea of what basically how the asbestos industry is doing. And as you can see here, 16% haven't done any of the individuals that we've surveyed. 16% haven't basically done any asbestos work in the last year. 43%, right, almost the vast majority have done at least one project, 1 to 10 projects a year, which is roughly run 1 to 10, could be anywhere from one project to basically one project a month. And then we have the guys that are basically, I call the guys who are really doing a lot of asbestos work. So your projects from 11 to over 100. And as you can see, basically, these people were basically somewhere around 40, basically 42% of the individuals that we surveyed are doing projects 11 to over 100. So the idea of this is to compare the data from year to year to see how is the industry doing. Is the industry going up? Is it going down? All right. And so when we look at the year before, we can see that basically we had 30% of the individuals not doing asbestos work, about 29% basically doing 1 to 10 projects, and then another third or a little bit over a third, like 41%. All right. So that's yeah, 40, 41, 42% doing asbestos projects. Okay. And then the year before, as you can see, again, 36% doing, haven't done any asbestos projects. At the 1 to 10 project, about 33% doing there. And then basically the next thing is about 31% doing an asbestos work in 21, 22. And as we can see from here, this is COVID. During the COVID period, you can see that almost 50% of the individuals weren't doing many asbestos projects. 28% were doing 1 to 10, and that the larger group, the 11 to over 100, that had been hit hard. Obviously, we didn't have data before this. We have the current data, which basically is about 24%. So the business has been going up year to year from 24%, 31% to 42 and 42%. So we are seeing a significant increase in asbestos work from the individuals that come to us for training. In the classes, we are discussing the asbestos ban, which the Frank-Lautenberg Chemical Safety for the 21st Century Act. This was signed by President Obama in 2016, and it amended the Toxic Substance Control Act and replaced economic burden with risk-based chemical assessments. All right, EPA was was authorized to pick 10 chemicals for fast track authorization, which asbestos was one of the 10 chemicals. In 2019, we got the significant new use rule, or the SNR, which require manufacturers and importers to receive EPA approval before starting or resuming manufacturing or importing or processing of asbestos. All right. And then in March of 24, we got basically the Part 1 chrysotile asbestos, which was issued in March. The EPA's rule bans 6 ongoing uses of chrysotile asbestos and only one of the 6 recognized fibers, all right, including chloralkali diaphragms, asbestos vehicle brakes, and certain gaskets. Compliance dates for some facilities up to 12 years. While a step forward, the rule is limited in scope and leaves significant gaps. All right. Also, in December of 24, EPA announced that had determined that disturbing and handling asbestos associated with legacy uses is asbestos still in place in buildings, whether residential, commercial, or private or public buildings. All right. And determined that basically there was a significant risk unreasonable risk to human health. And it considered all the fibers and the amphibole fibers, the Libyan amphibole fibers of termalite, windshite, and richterite. All right. So we are discussing these bans. We're also trying to mobilize our students to basically support this bill, the RBAN bill, which is the Alan Reinstein Ban Asbestos Now Act of 2025. It is a bipartisan bill, and it would ban all asbestos fibers, including chrysotile, chrysotile, amosite, euthaphylite, termalite, actinolite, and related fibers like windshite and richterite. It would ban all current and future use of these fibers, and basically would ensure protections are comprehensive and not subject to judicial review. All right, and this is the 5th introduction, reflecting years of persistent leadership and growing congressional support. One of the more significant things that we're talking about in the classes is this risk assessment that was published back in 2021. It was performed by the Committee for Risk Assessment and prepared as an expert opinion for the European Chemical Agency on the scientific evaluation of occupational exposure limits for asbestos. They have concluded that there is no safe level of exposure to asbestos, and instead they provided an exposure risk relationship to express the excess risks of cancer at different levels of exposure to asbestos. And as you can see here, that the current occupational exposure limit, which is 0.1 fibers per cc, has a current risk of 125 cancer cases per 100,000 people exposed. In addition, you can see at the current clearance level, 0.01 fibers per cc, that the current risk cancer level, is 12 cancer cases per 100,000 people exposed. So these are some of the things we're discussing in our refresher classes and showing what the consequences are for not basically reducing the exposure limits. Pretty much right now, the most dangerous industry is the asbestos industry. We are also discussing the Industrial Code 56, the asbestos survey fact sheet that basically came out that clarifies the exemptions and federal requirements of when a survey has to be done. We're also discussing the OSHA regulation 1926-1101 and the current proposal by OSHA to align the asbestos standard more, uh, align the asbestos standard with the respirator standard, removing the HEPA filter requirement, and changes to class one exposure stressors and other changes. Public comment period ends in November 2nd, and we've been discussing that in classes on how dangerous these changes are, and basically promoting people to basically make their comments known to OSHA. And we basically have notifying our students about New York City basically switching to an online program to basically renew your asbestos licenses. And this online program is at this website, and it's the only way to renew your license now. They did not follow the state where you could basically apply for your license by mail still. Here, you won't. You can only renew your license through the website. So these are some of the things we're basically talking about in our asbestos classes. I would like to see you at one of our classes and hear what you have to say about these different issues. Like I said, we are talking about these issues and trying to come up with ways to support the R-band bill, and needless to say, to make comments on the OSHA changes, which I believe, which in my opinion, is very, very dangerous. So hopefully you will join us in one of the classes, and maybe we'll even decide to interview you in after the refresher. Thank you for listening.